All right.
Okay, so the Board of Selectmen is actually already in session. We had our regular business meeting at 6 o'clock, and we've been in recess, but we are now reconvened, and I'll turn it over to Milt so he can call his budget committee meetings.
Yeah, we have a quorum. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Missing Brian, welcome back, and probably Jill will be late.
All right, here. You're all here.
Oh, excellent. Oh, cool. First order of business would be, has everyone seen the minutes from the meetings on the on the 15th and the 17th?
Yes.
Anyone have a chance to review them? And are there any changes or additions needed? I'll accept the motion to accept.
So moved.
And seconded.
A second.
Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded to accept the motions from the January 15th and January 17th minutes. All those in favor? And it's unanimous. All right.
Good. All right, so tonight we continue our presentations from department heads on their proposed budgets for 2019. Tonight is the fire department, but before we get started, I want to really thank Ruth for a lot of the homework that she did since our last meeting. I sent her an email. She was probably already working on this stuff anyway, but I sent her an email on Sunday with a list of stuff for today, and she had emails out by like late Sunday night. So I didn't intend for her to work the weekend.
A double time?
Yeah, right. I never thought of that. No, but Ruth, thank you very much, Ruth, for the extra work and getting some of that extra information. All right.
Yes. And a question for Ruth.
Yeah.
With regarding, it just occurred to me following our last meeting regarding the telecommunications budget. Considering that the telecommunications committee hasn't met, who submitted that budget?
No, most of that's my budget. Yes, most of that's what I have come up with the budget.
How did you determine what was needed and what wasn't needed?
Well, the last couple of years, Nelson, I've pretty much done the budget and given it to the telecommunications committee, who's gone over it and accepted it. So what's in there is the amount of hours required for a public information technician, IT services, all the figures that I pay all the bills for every year.
And what about equipment purchases?
Well, it's just a kind of a guesstimate of things that we might need this year.
Okay. So we certainly can go back and maybe after the fire chief's presentation, based on some of the new handouts or updated information that Ruth has provided, if we want to go back and ask some follow-up questions based on some of that information, we can do that, but I want to respect the chief's time and turn it over to him and let him get started.
Thank you. For those I haven't been introduced to, my name is Joseph Moore. I'm the new fire chief here in town since March of last year. The numbers you have in front of you tonight are, I won't say significantly, but fairly different from what you may have received a week or so ago. I'm going to go through some of this. Some of the stuff that's presented historically for 2016, 2017 is more to give an idea of where the department has gone, what the town has asked the department to provide, and what those costs have meant in regards to some of the challenges that we faced last year as I review the 2018 budget, and then I'll get into what I've asked for this year's budget. So once again, you have this in front of you. I won't read it line by line. I can't stand people that read PowerPoints to you. The biggest is we did go over the 2018 budget this year by 2.42% as a total. We did overspend on labor, on the operating labor, not the per diem labor, and there was an overspent item on the fire chief's line. That was a predetermined issue, the board has dealt with that. On the operations overage, I did a mid-year wage adjustment. I did my best to calculate a wage adjustment that was appropriate for the department members that wasn't going to put us over budget. We still did go over, but the fact of the matter is that the wages that were there for firefighters and EMS providers across the board were not commensurate with what other departments of similar sizes were getting. So I felt that needed to be corrected. We also did have more fire calls, a couple of very lengthy ones, and with more people involved, that just involves more money as well. The per diem line was underspent simply because we weren't able to fill all of the shifts, and we did have a transition of some of the per diem staff that we had earlier in the year that don't work for us now. Moving on.
Actually,
Sorry.
can you, I apologize, my brain was trying to absorb everything.
Sure.
The mid-year wage adjustment, can you summarize that again for me, please?
So that was, so I looked at the wages that people were paid, and it looked at what their department qualifications were as far as their firefighter 1 and 2 certification, their EMS licensure, things of that nature. And there's a base pay for the department that's based on the minimum wage. And then depending on the certifications they have, whether they're an officer, there are additional stipends to that. But the total value of those, when they were looked at, like I said, were not commensurate with other members of similar sized departments doing the same functions. So that was why.
So is this a predetermined amount from the board ahead of time, or, I guess I'm kind of curious why the adjustments were made mid-year as opposed to planning it for 2019 budget, since it caused us to go over?
That's a decision I need to take responsibility for. I did the calculations behind it. I did not believe that the increases would take us over budget, and I presented that to the board, and it did go over.
So just remember the department heads have, in terms of what we approve for a budget, bottom line responsibility. So they need to manage within that, and so they certainly have leeway within there on what to do. The chief certainly did come to the board with it and stated his case, and the position of the board is he's the chief, it's his budget, he's, as long as he manages it within the parameters, then that's what he's hired to do.
So where we went over 2.4%, does he have to come back to the board to get different funding moved around, or in total you were over 2.4?
The total was 2.42%, but it wasn't just the it wasn't just the labor line. We were also significantly over on vehicle maintenance.
Yep. So what has to happen in those cases, when we do have an article that is overspent, there has to be a question on this next town meeting's warrant to basically ask for permission to take the funds needed to cover the overages, transfer it from undesignated to that account to cover the overage.
Does minimum wage affect our pay here?
Some of the members, mostly the newer members, but honestly, when you look at it, the minimum wage increase eats into someone that's spent years acquiring multiple certifications and maintains an EMS license that requires renewal and re-education and things like that. It makes it less valuable and kind of less interesting for some people, to continue to try to put the work into doing that, because these aren't people that are getting, this isn't their primary job. This isn't a full-time firefighter in Auburn or Portland where that's their career that's based on that. This is something they're doing actually to provide service to the town on top of their career and family and everything else.
So minimum wage has an effect on the psychology of the whole thing? It's not a legal requirement, or?
Correct.
Okay.
But you're not gonna get someone to go to paramedic school for minimum wage. This is just, as I've termed it, as labor support. This is all of the health insurance, FICA, Medicare thing. These are kind of hard and fast numbers that really we don't have a lot of control over. It all depends on what we're paying for salaries and excuse me, and for labor. But because we did go over on the labor line, of course, these lines were higher than expected.
So particularly when we're on workers' comp, am I reading that correctly? Or is that? We're under, never mind.
No, the overage was actually specifically on the wages, excuse me.
Is workers' comp determined by town or by department?
Ruth, is that something you?
It's town and department, so we have a certain mod that we have at the entire town, and that's affected by the number of claims that we have. But there are different rates, so fire department personnel are charged at a different rate than public works, and they're charged at a different rate than the administration. So like if you're sitting at a desk and you don't have a huge liability, you're not gonna get hurt very often. It's a much lower rate than somebody who's fighting fires or plowing roads.
But a workman's comp claim by a town hall employee affects the fire department and
Yeah.
public works,
Yeah.
okay.
Finishing out more of the labor discussion, there have been and there will continue to be questions about the necessity and use of per diem here in the town. And these were some numbers that I was able to pull together. So right now, we currently do per diem staffing with one person from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And then we have stipend and staffing at night, and that's on a voluntary basis. People can sign up for that stipend. And those are 2 people covering that shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The thing that was interesting is that the majority of the calls, these are just EMS calls, these are not fire-related calls. The majority of the calls happen during the day, and 127 of them versus 76. We did not miss a single request for EMS response in the town during the per diem time, and the average response time from the time we were alerted with the radio tones to the truck going out the door was about 3.74 minutes. And that was still missing almost 9% of the total per diem shifts for this entire year. In 2016, there were no per diem. In 2017, they had staffed it for half the year. It was voted on at the town meeting, and they went forward with it afterwards. This year, we did the entire year, and these are the numbers that we came up with. But relying on the voluntary or the stipend and staffing at night, there were 76 calls. We missed 8 of those. Average response time for that is double, because we're waiting for people to come from home to get the ambulance to get it out the door. The total stipend and shifts without coverage, it's kind of hard to track because we plan the per diem at the start of the month. We have a schedule that's put out, and there are very few shifts that are left open. The nighttime stipend coverage is a little bit different. We have the calendar that people come in and sign up on, excuse me. And we have a spot for a driver and a spot for an EMS provider right now. What happens is a lot of times the driver slots get filled up pretty quickly, but we have less EMS providers than we have people that can just drive the ambulance. So those shifts don't always get filled right away. So if I looked at that at the beginning of the month, I'd be pretty concerned about my coverage. But people come in at the end of the day and they look at that and say, oh, no one's on tonight, so they sign up and they cover. So it's really kind of hard to because when I look back at the end of the year, everything is nearly completely filled, but it may not be filled until that day when that happens. So in my opinion, the per diem staffing and the money that's paid for it has certainly served the town well. That's not only revenue that's lost, but it's a service that the town has agreed to provide the citizens that we wouldn't have been able to cover nearly as well otherwise. Especially with the fact that, once again, most people working full-time jobs and not being in town during the day, it would be very difficult to mount that response, and certainly not in that period of time.
Chief, on that 3.74 minutes
Yes.
on the stipend, it's a tone to rescue en route. So those people are in the building, right?
Correct.
On the per diem one. And so the tone comes, you're saying it takes them almost 4 minutes just to leave the building?
Usually there's no more than 2 people here at a time anyway. There are days when there's a per diem person and Diana's here and I'm here. That's usually much faster. The issue comes with having to secure the building before we leave, because the doors are open, the public comes in and out for burn permits or anything else. So it's getting gear on the truck, being clear about where you're going, getting the building secured, and then leaving. So that's I mean, as an example, where I worked before in Rockland, we were 45 seconds we're out the door, but
Right,
you
yeah.
have 7 people and a receptionist in the station all
Oh.
the time, so it's different.
Okay.
I don't think that for any department running per diem staffing the station set up like this, I don't think that's far off at all.
Right. And the tone, was it tone to rescue, that's from the first tone? Or
Yes.
the tone that was responded to?
Correct, the first
From
time,
the first tone?
from the first time.
Okay.
So you said there were 76 calls under a stipend staffing?
Yes.
And 8 were not responded to?
Well, so that would have been a total, that would have been a total call of, a total of 84 calls. But 8 of them were not responded to. 76 were covered, 8 were not.
So when that happens, we're depending on another town to respond?
Correct. And depending on where the call is in town, the dispatch center will respond the closest mutual aid ambulance.
And they weren't responding because nobody was here?
Correct.
So I don't understand the stipend shift coverage, variable and hard to track.
So as I was saying, so the per diem staffing, so during the day, that's scheduled a month at a time. The nighttime is, it's a completely voluntary sign up. We have a calendar in the kitchen that people come in, and like I said, some people come in and sign up, they know their schedule for the month. Other people don't necessarily know their availability, and they may come in at the last minute and sign up. So when I get the calendar and I look at it at the end of the month, all the shifts are filled in, or there may be 1 or 2 blanks.
So why can't you follow it at that point in time?
Because people aren't writing down that they what day and time they signed up, they're just writing in that they signed up.
Is it an online system for the per diem?
It is not. That was an expenditure, honestly, that we cut this year, simply because most people would come in and give their schedule to Diana anyway, and it was just as easy to manage it without.
So they're actually just being manually scheduled?
Correct.
Why wouldn't we do the same with the stipend? I guess I'm with Neil, like, why wouldn't, I'm not seeing why we wouldn't schedule and plan stipend staffing and track it the same way we do per diem.
Okay, I guess I'm not explaining it clearly enough, sorry. So when we put the calendar out at the beginning of the month, so we put out that the shifts are available. People can come in and sign up whenever they're available. They know we put it out the first of the month, they can come in and sign up. But not everybody walks in here on the first of the month and signs up. Because not everybody knows their availability, not everybody knows their schedule, and things change. So at the last minute, someone may have to come in and cross their name off. Someone else walks in 5 minutes later, sees that the spot's open, and comes in and signs up. If we were gonna try to, it would become annoying very quickly for our membership if we were literally calling every person that wasn't listed on there every day to find out if they were available that night. I've seen services that have tried to do it that way, tried to schedule some voluntary shifts like that, and people just get tired of getting called on the phone and say, I'm just not available. Whereas leaving it to our staff to sign up for themselves, we do a good job of getting it covered. Because when I looked back at the calendars this afternoon, to try to figure out that, how many shifts weren't covered, I came up with like 5 for the year.
So I guess I'm still confused, why can't you just say 5 shifts weren't covered? That seems like you've tracked it to me.
Okay, so,
You can't track it ahead of time, but you can track it in hindsight.
right. Okay, yeah, I can see what you're saying there, yes. So roughly probably 5 to 10 shifts at the most. I looked back for like 6 months and realized so many of them were filled, it's not really a shocking number to see how many voluntary shifts weren't covered. The issue that comes up with is when these calls land and we don't have people here.
So if somebody has a stipend shift they've signed up for, and a call comes in, what does that look like? Do they get called directly, or does the call just go out and they're the ones that are supposed to respond to it?
The call goes out to everyone because we don't differentiate between the fire and the EMS tone. The call goes out, but excuse me, I'm a little nervous. People know that who signed up usually, and when we've started to do with our nightly dispatch tone test, we've announced who the crew is that's on. So people generally know, either if they heard, Portable 2 is the only person on tonight, we know that Ken Scribner is the only one. So we have a driver, we have no EMS person on. So someone may come down and sign up, they may start to listen up. It's, once again, sometimes it's kind of the luck of the draw because it's a voluntary system. It's not, no one's obligated to.
Right, so if nobody is, let's say, if no EMS person is signed up on a particular night, and a call comes in, what happens? Is the tone goes out, like you said?
Tone goes out, no one responds, they'll do a second tone. Within 3 minutes, if no one responds to that, they're starting mutual aid.
Okay,
That's all part of our process.
if somebody does respond that wasn't originally signed up for stipend staffing, then they don't get paid the stipend, do they?
No.
Okay.
No, they just get paid their hourly for being.
They're whatever their rate, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
How's the mutual aid work? It's just an automatic call?
Yeah, so the dispatch center has our response plan set up for depending on where it is in the town. It would be either Auburn or Lisbon and Freeport are typically our most common mutual aid. Sometimes Brunswick will get pulled in, but.
And are they always staffed at night, or?
I honestly, well, Brunswick is a full-time department, Auburn is a full-time department. Lisbon, I'm not sure about their staffing levels, and I don't think Topsom is at night. I think they're pretty.
Freeport on
I think Freeport has one person on 24 hours a day, but I'm not positive how they run their schedule.
So if we know we don't have an EMS person signed up, can you inform dispatch so they don't wait for so many tones, or is it just kind of standard, this is what has to be done?
It's kind of standard, this is, it's the way that it's done. And the other piece of it is, I'm here and I'm usually aware of when we don't have someone on, and I'm listening up anyway as paramedic to be able to cover ALS calls, so I'll just go. We usually, I can't think of a call this year where we didn't get a driver. It's getting an EMS provider. So that's where I look at it as my responsibility. If I know no one is around, I'm up.
So I have a question on that. So I've had people express to me that it's unusual to have EMS response service where both of the occupants in the vehicle are not EMTs. That that one's a driver not trained as an EMT. That is unusual. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I would disagree with that for a town like this. It's unusual for a career department or a for-profit ambulance service, because they just don't hire those types of staff, because they want to be able to plug and play people wherever. A town like this, it's very common to have an EMS provider and a driver.
Okay.
So could we outsource, for lack of a better word, 7 PM to 7 AM EMS service?
If you want to see that average response time increase to at least probably 15 minutes, sure. If we outsource, you're talking like outsourced like to another service?
Like what we do now when we're not here?
Why would that increase the response time?
Because even if say we contract with Freeport, even if they got the call right away, they're still much farther away than we are. They're much farther away than people who very oftentimes first respond to the scene from their home here. And secondly, we're not their primary response. They may be busy with other things, and there's no service around here that has an infinite number of staff or rescues. That would absolutely increase response times at night.
So that 8.5, that's from the time they leave their house. Is that what you're saying?
Nope, that
Tone.
from the time the tone goes off to the time they have gotten here and then the ambulance is leaving.
Also coming here and then leaving.
Correct.
So it's possible a total response time of 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
So I don't. Somebody gets out the door in Freeport in 4 minutes. They're here in less time than.
Well, it wouldn't be Freeport, it would be whoever was closest, right?
Well, if you're contracted with someone, if you're contracted with, let's say, United in Auburn,
And
and
that's,
they have to
sorry.
go to the Freeport Durham line, it's gonna take them a little while. Or if you're contracted with Freeport, meaning it's only Freeport that's responding to us, then it could take them a while to get to the Auburn Durham line. And if you're doing the tones, I think last year we determined from the time that the first tone goes out to the time that they will go to another town is like 9 minutes or something?
It's 6 minutes now. It's
Okay.
three minutes to the second tone and then 3 minutes to mutual aid.
So you got 6 minutes before they're even contacted.
The other piece of that is there is no service that's gonna do that for free long-term. Right now, if we wind up getting a mutual aid ambulance that covers a call that we can't at night, they bill the patient. Because that's their right within the healthcare laws to do that. But they don't charge us for that. If we ask for a paramedic intercept, they do charge for that. They're, well, 2 of the 3 services we regularly deal with charge for that. But if we just started saying from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., if we don't have someone sign up, just automatically call mutual aid, and another town finds out about that, they're gonna say, well, we're not doing that without a contract. And then they're gonna start billing us pretty significantly for us.
We've asked similar questions in the past, and the response we get is like mutual aid needs to be mutual, means it's somewhat of a two-way street. It's not expected for it to be equal both ways necessarily, but the understanding is that, that you contribute what you have the resources to contribute. Did I put that right?
Yes.
So,
How many mutual aid calls did we go on for other towns?
We responded to 7 mutual aid calls last year.
EMS wise or
Yes.
fire?
EMS wise, I do not have fire in front of me, but it was more than that. A lot of times we get turned around on the fire side of things, but.
Do you log these calls as far as what they are and what?
Oh yeah, there's a reporting system. So the EMS calls, there's a required patient care report that we have to file with the state. But there's a charting system that we have for all incidents that we report, whether it's fire or EMS, and that goes to the fire marshal's office. So yeah, all of that gets logged.
Do you have an electronic copy of that?
Yeah, I could pull that if you'd like it.
What format is it in?
It'd be a PDF, and a lot of that information would have to be redacted as far as the EMS calls, because I can't give you any patient-related information, but I can pull more specific response times, I can pull anything that you'd like to see.
Chief, you said that you had an electronic scheduling at one point, but you cut it out of this year's budget. If so, how much did that cost?
I'm trying to remember, that was later in this year. I think the subscription for that was about $400 a year. I mean, it's not much, but it's just not something that, it wasn't being utilized.
By the members or?
And by members, like I said, most people when they came in to do a shift would just think to hand off their schedule to Diana, and it's just as easy for us to track it that way, rather than once again last minute getting after people to, you know, can you log in, can you put in your availability, those types of things. It's like I said, it's a line that you walk, and I've seen it in other services that I've been a part of. When people are giving, they have a passion for what they're doing, they have an aptitude for what they're doing as far as providing the service to the town. But when it's not your career, and that's one more thing on top of taking the kids to basketball, or taking the wife out, or just having a day off to yourself, the last thing you want is your phone ringing every day asking, well, what's your availability? Can you cover tonight? It's a fine line to walk.
So are you saying that the software mandated, the way the software works, you'd have to put your availability in? Everybody would have to go in and put their availability in?
Yes.
Okay.
So they go in,
So
they would
that's
go in.
why you stopped using the software?
They would go in and put in their availability, and then we still had to go in to approve it anyway and set the schedule that they wanted. Because people would give us a list of, 7 or 8 days that they're available. But 1, making shifts equitable to everybody, 2, making sure we had the proper licensure coverage as best as possible spread around. Not everybody got every day they put available for.
So the software really wasn't matching your needs?
It wasn't. It's for a much larger service that has that just has a more, I don't want to say standardized, or maybe that is the word, scheduling system, or more protocolized scheduling system, but it works well the way we're doing it right now.
What's the stipend rate that gets paid?
$35 a night.
And that's paid whether they have to respond to a call or not?
Correct. But in agreeing to take that stipend, they also have to make sure that they are available. If a call comes in and they're suddenly, they haven't shown up, or, well, geez, I went out to dinner and I had a drink and now I can't respond, then that becomes a problem I have to deal with, because they have committed to providing that service for the town.
And are they then also paid an additional rate if they do go out on a call?
Yes,
Yeah.
when they go out on a call, then they get their regular hourly rate. And that's a standard for anywhere that does night shift stipends.
Okay. And each person's rate on the department is different depending on their licenses or whatever?
Correct, yes.
You know what the range is for the hourly rates?
Yeah, from $11 to $23. $23 is, one of our deputy chiefs, who's also a paramedic, and he's a deputy chief, he's a fire instructor, he has multiple certifications that add on to that pay rate.
So they would get paid, so let's say they're called, they have to run somebody to the hospital, they get paid from the time they show up here to the time they get back from the hospital, their hourly rate?
Correct.
Okay.
Because there's also paperwork that has to be filled out within 24 hours. It's not like they can take the paperwork home and do it, because of the sensitive patient information, that all has
Sure.
to stay here and be done here, so.
And the per diem rate, is that just their hourly rate?
Correct.
And do you know how much money you spent on the 7 PM to 7 AM DMS service?
Where was that? I honestly do not have that specifically broken out, what we spent last year. I'd have to pull that. I apologize. I do not have that in front of me right now. The other thing that we are noticing that does add to our call times and our response times is the time that we do spend in the hospital. It's not as simple as walking in, handing off a patient and leaving. Once we get there, the patient gets triaged. Our biggest problem right now is the patients that request or need to be transported to main medical center, because that's often a wait, and then we get into the room and we can't just drop the patient off, and we need to actually give a report to a nurse there. The other night, I did a transport where I spent a half hour waiting to get a nurse into the room, because the ERs are that busy. It's just it's a problem of the healthcare system, where the ERs have become the free clinic, and it's just, we do get paid to wait, and that has been a noticeable increase in the last several years.
Do you know, of the 76 calls, do you know what the average time was spent on each call for those people?
I do not know the average, but I can tell you from experience that for a transport here, it's no less than 2 hours. Getting to a call, stabilizing the patient, transporting them, getting them there, getting them back here, cleaned up, getting reports done. I would bank on 2 hours. And that's if we're transporting to the shortest distance hospital. Sorry.
You said patients can request what hospital they're sent to?
They can.
Is it up to a certain, I mean,
Well,
they can't request to go to
there's-
Southern Maine, I presume?
No, where our standard areas to transport to, it's within reason that they can request. But we can also choose a different hospital based on their condition. If they want to go to Midcoast Hospital and it's obvious to our provider that they're having a significant cardiac event, we're going to say, you need to choose Central Maine or Maine Med. And we often get notifications that either Central Maine or Maine Med are on diversion because of how busy they are. So if someone has a minimal problem, and that's from our assessment, and they ask to go to a hospital that's on diversion, we'll tell them no. If the hospital is on diversion and they're still the closest hospital, it's a significant patient, we by law can overstep that. But so the patient request is legally supposed to be the first choice, but then there are other factors that come into it.
Do they get charged for the ambulance?
Yes, they do.
And that's dependent on where they go or how far the ride is, or what?
It depends on how far the ride is, what we provide for care. Whether it's basic life, what's termed BLS 1 or 2 or ALS 1 or 2, there's different pay schedules based on that. I don't know, and that changes on a regular basis. We have our billing done through Freeport Rescue.
Okay.
and they do a pretty good job for us.
So if I look at per diem staffing, and I take 127 calls, I could take the labor for per diem, 195,569, and divide by the total calls, and that would give me the cost per call.
Excuse me.
So the labor per diem was,
No, labor per diem was 89,647.
okay, gotcha.
But you also need to remember that this is, there are points where we go days, sometimes past a week without calls. That's,
I think that line says per diem, but that also includes the stipend, right?
that does at this point include the nighttime stipends. That was the budget that I inherited had responses, it was listed as responses, but that covered all nighttime, or basically all fire calls, EMS calls that were outside of per diem, trainings, meetings, all of that. And per diem had the per diem and the nighttime stipends lumped into it. The budget I've put together for you this year, and I've broken it out a little bit more, has it more specified as to exactly where that money is broken out to and how it's intended to be spent.
And the, thank you, and the per diem staffing for 2018, that does not include any transports, that's just emergency calls. That doesn't include scheduled transports.
We don't do those,
Okay, gotcha,
and it would not be anything I'd recommend the town getting involved with.
okay, thanks.
Where does the money come back to the town?
Goes to the capital budget.
From the capital budget?
Yeah.
Is that ambulance fees you're talking about?
Yeah.
So is the capital budget the same discussion that we had with Public Works as far as how that can or can't be used right now?
Yep.
I forget, was it voted on that the per diem would go to the capital budget?
The per diem, no, the per diem doesn't go.
Or sorry, the ambulance?
I was actually just gonna ask Ruth that. I know operational budget overages was voted to go, but I don't, Ruth, do you know if,
I don't know for sure.
so it could be something town voted on years past, or it could just be a convention that we've just done it that way. We'd have to research it and find out. Because depending upon the answer would determine whether it would require a town meeting vote to do something different or not.
And that was 103,000 last year we brought in on that?
No, it was 48,000 we brought in last year.
Yeah.
So that marks 102,000 includes the 48,000 from the ambulance, but it also includes the 55,000 that was voted on town for. Sorry, I didn't break that one out really well.
So it is possible to use that for operating expenses if we want to?
We don't know
We
yet.
don't know. If it wasn't a town meeting vote, to put the ambulance revenue in capital, then we could. But if it was a town meeting vote to do that, we would need a town meeting vote to change it for the next year.
It would be a kind of a big variable to put back into your budget. The money from the ambulance. I'm sure you could, but it'd be a big variable. How would you know?
I would assume it would go towards next year's budget, would probably be the easiest way
Yeah.
to calculate it.
Yeah.
Or it just goes, just goes into general undesignated, and then it's there
Yeah.
to be used for any purpose. I mean, there's lots of different ways you can do it. I think, I don't remember exactly, I seem to recall that the thinking was that they wanted the revenues from the ambulance to go into capital because they wanted to see the offset against the ambulance expense and things of that sort. So that's, I wouldn't bet my house on it, but that's kind of what I have in my head right now. But we can try to research that. And on some of these where we can't, we can't find the answer, then we probably have to default to, well, we're gonna need a town meeting vote to make the change, because even if we're not sure, if we can't confirm it, then we would have to do that. And I think, again, coming, based on what we get for a recommendation from the Capital Improvements Program Committee, we may look at some of those things.
Any other questions before I move forward with this?
No, thank you, Chief. This is one of those areas, much like a lot of things in public works, which is, it's tough to quantify like cost benefit analysis here, and I think anything we can do to make that as clear to people as possible is just helps when it comes time to town floor, so.
Moving on through the rest of the 2018 operating expenses. Electricity, it seems everybody in town went over with their budget. Once again, this was a budget that I inherited with no prior experience, so I really can't say much about it, other than the fact that I operated as best I could within it, and I'm looking to move forward into this year's plan. Building maintenance and equipment maintenance. Equipment maintenance, really, I'm not sure if anyone paid attention to my multiple sessions of crying at select board meetings about how much problems we've had with some of the trucks. The biggest issue is that the trucks are designed to be used. And if they sit for a little while and they don't get exercised, then they haven't had the staff here to do it prior to the last year or so. They just need to be exercised more. We do have the new engine of the new rescue coming this year, which will decrease a significant piece of the maintenance simply because the engine will come with a new pump test that will be inspected, be under warranty. The rescue as well, tested, warranted, and ready for at least a year after that. So there's things that we won't have to pay for with those trucks this year, but some of the things were just nothing you could have anticipated, whether the trucks were run or not. They're machines, and machines break. And unfortunately, several things broke this year, and it cost us over significantly. Building maintenance, there was prior to my arrival, apparently there was a boiler failure, and that was replaced. That was a significant chunk that pushed the building maintenance over. Equipment maintenance, once again, totally unanticipated issues with a couple of the apparatus. That just became issues that we had to spend the money to fix, otherwise it's a great looking paperweight that does nothing to help anybody in the town. So it is unfortunate that it costs them doing the business.
Can I ask a question? Was the damage to the ladder truck from Soper Road, is that included in the equipment maintenance
Yes.
line? How much?
But that was all but $1,000, and that was covered by insurance. So we paid the deductible. Excuse me. The ambulance intercept line, that went down. One with my arrival as a paramedic in town, and two coordinating a more regular rotation of the other paramedics that we have in the service. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come to the 2019 budget.
Do you mind explaining what that means real quick?